in one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime, and we have momentum. It is on our side. Can you feel it?
So the Harris campaign clearly thinks that the wind is at their backs, but they are being very cautious, saying that every battleground is key, and they still see a very close race. Now, here in Pennsylvania, after remarks in Allentown, she is set to head to Reading, Pennsylvania, and also two larger rallies later on today. She will be in Pittsburgh, also with Katy Perry, and then that closing rally in Philadelphia, star-studded with the likes of Oprah and Ricky Martin as well. So the Harris campaign definitely making this last-minute push focused on critical Pennsylvania. Jose.
And meantime, Vaughn, Trump is kicking off this day in North Carolina, not necessarily a state his team was expecting to hit on the last day of this race. And it comes as the former president has been ramping up his violent rhetoric about Liz Cheney and the media. What's the thinking right now inside his campaign?
Yeah, hey, good morning, guys. This is the one battleground state that he won in 2016 and 2020. And he campaigned here the last 3 days. He's here again today for his first rally here in Raleigh. It's going to be one of 4 events. But this comes after a weekend in which Donald Trump's closing message was very explicit. It was one in which he warned that a Harris administration would oversee an economic depression and Americans losing their jobs. He also, though, was focused heavily on grievances against the press and even the 2020 election, making the case that he should have never left the White House in the first place. Take a listen to some of his remarks from this weekend.
They are fighting so hard to steal this damn thing. We had the safest border in the history of our country the day that I left. I shouldn't have left. I mean, honestly, because we did so well. To get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news. And I don't mind that so much, because I don't mind.
Of course, we have heard him for the last 9 years refer to the press as the fake news, but we have never heard anything explicit in those terms of suggesting that members of the press should be shot. But for Donald Trump here, this is the quintessential campaign rhetoric that we have seen that has led him here to this point, and rhetoric that leads him into, apparently from polling here, into a competition in these battleground states. I want to quickly show you here. We're in North Carolina. This is going to be his first stop. He's making 2 stops in Pennsylvania, Reading, and then Pittsburgh before finishing the night, as he did in 2016 and 2020 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I want to show you guys real fast what this crowd looks like, because Donald Trump was scheduled to take the stage at 10 a.m. and our Tony Butler is going to show you what this crowd currently looks like. We're looking at about a capacity about 70% full here. And for 9 years, I'm going to have Tony Pan to the right. For 9 years, we have talked about the enthusiasm and the masses that have come out for Trump's rallies time and again, even at his politically lowest points, including in 2022. But interestingly, and I can't tell you exactly why, but in this final week, we have seen far smaller crowds. We were in Greensboro, North Carolina, where just a few thousand people. Macon, Georgia, just a few thousand people yesterday. What does that mean? Ultimately, you can only discern so much from what crowd sizes look like. But interestingly, for the first time since I've been covering Donald Trump since 2015, there's been us in the press that have been looking around questioning why the crowd sizes have been less than what we are accustomed to. There are some people that have suggested that a great many folks have already early voted, so they feel like they've done their thing. They don't got to come out. Others have said, look, he's been to North Carolina so many times. It's essentially saturated at this point, but at this point in time, it's hard not to take any little clue that there is, from early voting locations to the rallies where we're accustomed to seeing him draw thousands of people. Today, that's not so much the case. We'll see what the next 3 rallies look like, though, guys.
And we know crowd size matters to Donald Trump. Von Hilliard, Gay Gutierrez. Guys, thanks for the reporting.
And let's bring in MSNBC political analyst, former Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill, a former also Republican congressman from Pennsylvania, Charlie Dent. Senator, so the vice president, for the first time, at least in this campaign, didn't use the word Trump in her rally yesterday. There's a change. Do you think that this is on purpose? Is this an effective one?
Yeah, I definitely on purpose. If you look at the polling right now, there's one trend that, a couple that stick out to me. One is the enthusiasm is higher on our side, but an important one is the late breaking votes are going to her. And, you know, we call those late-breaking votes, those undecideds, those, 6 of them in the whole country.
Right.
We call them the feels voters. And that's because typically when people make up their mind at the last minute, it's what they feel about the candidate. And knowing that, what he's done over the last week is ugly. It's dark. It's inappropriate. It doesn't show the kind of integrity and character I think those feels voters are looking for. And so what she's doing the last week is just the opposite. It's more about you and your family and doing better and turning the page and, importantly, change. And that's what she's doing rather than grievance about Trump.
You know, when you talk about feels voters, how much of the feel for voters includes how they feel about, for example, not just the candidate or the candidates, but also they feel about their possibilities of fulfilling the canasta básica, the basic foodstuffs that you have to have in a home? How much of the feel of the personal pain in the economy is that a part of these last-minute feels voters?
I think that's really an important point. And what's interesting, if you look at the NBC poll that came out yesterday, it's a split. On the economy, they say Trump is slightly better. But on taking care of the middle class, taking care of you, she is now ahead. That shows her discipline. She's run a really masterful campaign, a really difficult one to run, by the way, and given the time frame she had and what she had to accomplish. But she has been very disciplined about hammering, taking care of you, prices, housing, child tax credit, all of those things, and that's broken through. And so now, and then the ad she's run with him telling the billionaires, don't worry, I'm going to give you another tax cut. That is a juxtaposition of images, I think, that's sticking for her, and I think it's going to work for her.
Congressman, Trump's increasingly erratic closing message, quite the contrast from what we are hearing from the vice president. He's talked about, or at least painted imagery of opponents and members of the media being shot. He's offered more baseless claims about cheating and even promising his early days in office could be nasty. Listen.
For the past 9 years, we have been fighting against the most sinister, corrupt forces on earth. With your vote in this election, you can show them once and for all that this nation does not belong to them. We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. You watch. It's going to be so good. It's going to be so much fun. It'll be nasty a little bit at times, and maybe at the beginning in particular.
Congressman Dunn, who is Trump trying to reach with that kind of closing pitch? Could it even be a turnoff, perhaps, for voters in states like yours, the key battleground of Pennsylvania?
He's clearly talking to his hard MAGA base. I just can't imagine under any scenario where his campaign thinks it's a good idea for him to be talking about shooting the media or putting Liz Cheney in front of a firing squad, Arnold Palmer's crotch, RFK and against fluoride and vaccinations. I mean, this is, and the Puerto Rican garbage comments. I just can't imagine how this is helping him going into the final days, because many voters question his temperament and his fitness. And this will just further add to those questions. I'm sitting here in Allentown, Pennsylvania, about just about a mile west of the campus of Muhlenberg, where Kamala Harris will be later today. I can guarantee you they're going to be banging on the Puerto Rican issue in this city that's over half Hispanic, and mostly Puerto Rican. And so right now, though, as I look at this right now, I can't explain Trump's campaign because he just simply has not reached out to those more moderate centrist voters. Harris has at least tried to do that. Trump just seems to keep doubling down, tripling down on the MAGA base with these types of incendiary and erratic comments that are really not helpful. And by the way, we ought to be looking at this Iowa poll. I'm not saying that might be an outlier, but if that poll is directionally correct, I'd be very nervous if I were the Trump campaign, showing women are senior women, I think, up by 20 points for Harris. And there are other indicators in that. It might be an outlier, but I'm getting the sense that post-Dobbs that women are going to play an outsized role in this. I expect to be surprised in these results. I know it's a tight race, according to the polls, but I just have a feeling something's happening out there that we just haven't been able to measure in all these polls.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the Dobbs issue was certainly significant in 2022. Charlie, do you think that this poll, which some say is an outlier, it's clearly from the state's gold standard pollster there,
right.
But do you think that this is indeed an indication of some underlying movement that maybe pollsters haven't in the past been able to determine?
Well, post-Dobbs, Democrats have performed very well. Certainly in the 2022 midterm, they exceeded expectations. And in numerous special elections for both federal and state office, state legislative races, we have seen significant Democratic overperformance. And special elections don't necessarily, dictate what will happen in a presidential election. But I'm just looking at all the elections I've seen in the referendum questions since Dobbs, and the Democrats have done extremely well. And so you see a reliable poll from Iowa showing that these senior women are voting in huge numbers for Kamala Harris, tells me something might be happening. And it wouldn't just be in Iowa, it would be elsewhere. So I think that we have to all take a deep breath and just, again, expect to be a little bit surprised tomorrow.
So I just want to get your take on this Iowa poll, Senator. If you're the Harris campaign, do you seize on this and try to capitalize in some way? Do you send somebody to Iowa?
No, it's done what it needed to do for them. It was a little bit of an earthquake. First of all, everybody in the political world knows Ann Seltzer. Everyone knows her polling acumen and how accurate she's been when many other pollsters weren't over the last 3 cycles. I mean, she rarely misses by more than a point. So it's very hard to go after this poll as an outlier because all the pollsters are going, oh, my gosh, maybe we've modeled it wrong. Well, we even had one pollster last night saying, I'm going to go back and remodel the poll after Seltzer's poll came out, because I think now the polling community is worried they have overcompensated for their mistakes on Trump in 16 and 20 and undercounted these women. And you know what I say? Don't ever underestimate the strength of women who are, I would say a word that's not polite, but let's just say really angry.
I say don't underestimate the strength of women, period.
There you go. That's even better.
That's the word of my household.
That's even better, Anna.
That's true. So both of you have run successful campaigns in the past. And I'm just thinking with you, Senator, what are you looking at and what will you be looking at tomorrow?
Well, I think really what's happening is what I'm really looking at is turnout, and where is the turnout the strongest. I think it's really important in, for example, the blue blob that is overtaking Georgia, emanating out from Atlanta. How far does that reach when we start getting early returns? How strong are those suburbs in terms of turnout that have increasingly made Georgia such a competitive state? And going to be looking at some of the key counties in Pennsylvania. I think the Allentown area that Charlie knows very well, I think that's when we'll first decide whether or not the Puerto Rican dismissiveness that happened of the Trump campaign, whether or not that really did take hold, and if those votes come in the way that we hope. And then, of course, I'm going to be watching those Senate races. I care very much. This is my class, the class I got elected with, John Tester, Sherrod Brown, Bob Casey. They're all my dear friends. So I'll confess, I will be paying very close attention to the presidential, but I'm going to be looking out after my friends, too, and see how they do.
Yeah, they're the ones defending their seats. Then you have other places like Arizona where you've got Ruben Gallego up against Carrie Lake.
Exactly. And people need to understand the control of the Senate. And that's why these margins matter. If you're in California or New York, let me just say to you, it matters that you vote. I know the Electoral College diminishes your power, but it matters in controlling the House and the Senate. And the margin by which she might win by also matters in terms of how stable our democracy remains.
Very quickly, if you will, former Congressman Charlie Dent, give us what